Good morning, and thank you for joining us today for this public information briefing. I'm Frederick County Executive Jan Gardner. And today I have a very serious and important topic to speak to you about. And it's a complicated process, so it is going to be a long series of comments. We need to work together to keep our school construction program on time and on schedule to address severe overcrowding that we have in certain parts of our county right now, specifically in Urbana and on the west side of the city of Frederick. School construction and adequate school facilities have always been one of my key priorities. In fact, years ago, a long time ago, I jumped into the political arena here in local government because schools were overcrowded. My children were attending overcrowded schools, and I wanted to solve the problem and make sure that school capacity kept up with the need. We know that adequate school facilities are important to the delivery of a high-quality education. I was passionate about school overcrowding back then in the late 90s when I first ran for office, and I continue that passion today. During my time as a county commissioner, we made steady progress with school overcrowding. Many years we built multiple schools. One year we actually had 5 school projects going, some new schools and some new additions. And over about a 10-year period, we reduced system-wide school capacity from over 100%, meaning that about half of our schools were overcrowded, to our goal of less than 90% system-wide. And this was a big accomplishment. So we didn't address every school overcrowding issue, but severe overcrowding was greatly diminished, and we had fewer overcrowded schools. Not only did we add capacity, we were then able to concentrate on school renovation and modernization of some of our older schools that had been deferred while we were building new seats. And that included the renovation of West Frederick Middle School, the new Linganore High School, Lincoln Elementary School, and North Frederick Elementary, to name a few. We also adopted a strong, functional, adequate public facilities ordinance to try to time residential development with our financial ability to provide needed schools. And we defined an overcrowded school as a school that was over 100% of state-rated capacity. And previous to that, schools overcrowding had been defined at some higher percentages of state-rated capacity. So a residential developer had to satisfy the school APFO in order for a project to move forward. So in areas where school overcrowding was already occurring or was projected to occur as a result of the student enrollment growth from the new residential development, if schools were over capacity, the project either had to wait until the county could build those new schools, or the developer was required to provide the capacity themselves to solve the problem. And in fact, we had one developer who built the 300-seat addition to Tuscarora High School to mitigate the failed student adequacy test. And we did have another developer who had agreed to build an addition to a middle school, but the last administration allowed that not to happen. This past year, the challenge of keeping school construction on schedule and on time has become even a really big issue in our community. The cost of new schools has skyrocketed, and they've skyrocketed for a number of reasons. They've skyrocketed due to market conditions, they've skyrocketed due to changes in regulations, and across the state, we've seen a big increase in school construction projects. So desperately needed schools that are currently on our books are seeing this rising jump in school construction cost. The state IAC, the Interagency on School Construction, has increased the allowable cost share per square foot for school construction by 21% and for site work by 7%. So that really reflects an increase in cost of at least 25%, and that reflects statewide increases in experience. Frederick High School will cost about $30 million more than was budgeted just a year ago. I mean, it was in the budget in the 80s, and now it's at 114.5. The price estimates for other needed new elementary schools in the queue, Butterfly Ridge, Sugarloaf Elementary, and Urbana Elementary, have all jumped around $6 million, $7 million each. When the Board of Ed recently discussed and adopted its 10-year master facilities plan and developed their school construction requests to come to the county and ultimately to the state, it became apparent that demand for new schools exceeded the available dollars. 2 desperately needed elementary schools are in need of funding. These schools are needed right now. These schools are already seriously overcrowded. For instance, on the west side of the city of Frederick, using September 30th enrollment numbers from this year, Hillcrest Elementary is at 140% of capacity, Waverly Elementary is at 137% of capacity. And in Urbana, Centerville Elementary right now is at 148% of capacity, and Urbana Elementary is at 135% of capacity. These schools are seriously overcrowded right now. Funding for these new schools in the upcoming fiscal year, assuming we can put a school in both places, means it'll be 2 years or close to 2 years before they're open to students. And so the overcrowding will likely be even worse. So delaying either of these elementary schools is simply unacceptable. These growing costs have led me to look at all of our options to keep our school construction projects on place, on track, and on time. Our students only get one shot at a quality education. They simply cannot wait. During the last administration, the rules in the APFO changed, the Adequate Public Facilities Ordinance for schools. A builder or residential developer was allowed an option to pay a fee, called a school construction fee or school mitigation fee, and continue to build in an area where schools were already overcrowded, adding more students and compounding an already identified problem. This created a plan to overcrowd schools, and school adequacy at 100% of state-rated capacity was tossed out the window. It is school overcrowding on the installment plan. There are 46 development projects who chose the option to pay a fee and proceed while schools were overcrowded. And 14 of them have codified their arrangement in a Developer Rights and Responsibilities Agreement, or a contract called a DRA, locking in their ability to use these mitigation fees until some point in the future. It could be 20 years, it could be 30 years, regardless of how overcrowded the schools will become. So we've evaluated and projected the impact of student enrollment from new development on school overcrowding. And we know in that some parts of the county, particularly Urbana, Monrovia, Newmarket, the east side of the county, some schools could become extremely overcrowded, even over 200% of state-rated capacity, if the school construction schedule is not kept on track. For instance, right now, Deer Crossing Elementary is at 125% of capacity, with a significant amount of growth in Linganore and in and around Newmarket, and there's not even any new school in the plan for that. So, I'm painting a pretty bleak picture here. And then to make it worse, based on the current approved impact fees and school construction fees, we know will be about $150 million short of the revenue needed to keep pace with the growth that's been approved, assuming that state and county funding can hold. What we are seeing on the school construction fund is really a perfect storm. It's a perfect storm of skyrocketing school construction costs, fed by market conditions, state mandates like prevailing wage, the stormwater laws, new energy efficient requirements, and some other things. And a plan put in place by the prior administration to allow residential development to continue no matter how overcrowded the schools and without the needed money to build the schools. And I will say that the Board of Education did oppose that change to the APFO when it was passed. So there's been a lot of talk and focus about the state's requirement to pay related to prevailing wage for schools. But that law only accounts for 10 to 11% of the increase for Frederick High School. Changes to stormwater management requirements, the fact that schools are now LEED certified, new energy efficiency standards for ventilation, et cetera, have also added cost. But the biggest portion of the cost is really from market changes. As Frederick High School PTA President Janice Schaefer put it at a recent legislative town hall meeting, the good news is the economy is back, and the bad news is the economy is back. We do see fewer people bidding on some of the school construction projects. So I'll give you an example of one area where we've seen a huge jump in our costs. We actually, Janice Spiegel, actually looked at all this separate bids for Frederick High School versus Linganore High School. And the mechanical system bids for Frederick High School nearly doubled what they were just a few years ago for Linganore High School. So I'm looking at all the options available to try to address this school overcrowding perfect storm. And these options include adjusting impact fees and school mitigation fees to reflect the increased cost in school construction, and to make sure that development pays its fair share so existing taxpayers are not stuck with the entire bill. In addition, I'm proposing changes in state legislation. I have a bill that I'm putting forward to ask the state to pay for the cost of state legislated mandates or to at least increase their fair share. I'm looking for public-private partnerships, and I'm pleased to say there are some developers who are willing to talk about that. I've talked with Tom Natelli, who's one of the primary developers in Urbana, and he's told me he's willing to be a partner in a solution in Urbana, and I really appreciate that. We're also looking at our ability to leverage more debt as revenue grows in the county, and we'll ask the Board of Education to look to contain costs through the design of schools and value engineering. So we need to tackle all these areas and perhaps some others if we're going to keep alive our promise of public education for the current and next generation of students in Frederick County by providing our students with the school facilities they need to be successful in school. Because I believe that every child deserves a seat inside of a school building. So today, I am asking the County Council to schedule a workshop to consider making changes in legislation to update the county impact fee and the school construction mitigation fees to accurately reflect the current actual cost of school construction. I'm not proposing any changes to the existing formulas for either impact fees or for the school mitigation fee. That was approved in 2012. I'm simply asking to use the same formula and recalculate the fees with the actual current new cost of school construction that we know today. At my request and the request of our budget officer, Kelly Weaver, Tischler Bice, an independent contractor, analyzed the current adopted formulas and fees. So this has been reviewed. Based on their analysis, both impact fees and school construction fees need to increase to keep pace with inflation and the rising cost of construction. So let's look at what happens with impact fees first. Based on the current estimates, the county portion of the net capital cost per student, which is part of the formula at the elementary level, has increased 22.4%. Fees under the impact fee formula will only increase at the elementary level. Tischler Bice does not recommend changing the middle school or high school impact fees at this time because we're not building any middle school or high schools in the next 6 years. So you can see on a chart that should come up that what happens to impact fees is an increase of around 10%. It varies a little bit by housing type, and we can give you this handout if you'd like it. And again, this is the longstanding impact fee formula. It's been reviewed by Tischler Bice, who's always done our impact fee studies, and this increase is, quite frankly, lower than the 20% plus increase we've seen in school construction costs because we're not changing the middle school and high school calculation. So now let's look at mitigation fees. Now, if a developer wants to proceed with a project that fails to meet the school adequacy standards in our APFO, the developer has the option to pay a school construction or mitigation fee and continue to build, even though schools are overcrowded. So this only applies to some developments. School construction fees, when added to the impact fee, equal 115% of the local share and the state share of school construction combined. That's how it was set up. So as school construction costs rise, impact fees rise, and to keep pace with inflation and other cost increases, the school construction fees or mitigation fees also rise. It's a simple equation, but the increase is magnified because of the way the school mitigation fee is calculated. So again, this formula was developed by the last board with input of the residential building community, and it included the state and local share, knowing that money would be needed sooner since schools were already overcrowded and there was nothing in the CIP. So the result of that math is an average increase of 67%, which is a quite stunning and staggering increase. And while this increase is significant, it follows the existing formula and it reflects the situation we face with rising costs and with some developments locking in place to build even when schools are overcrowded. There are several reasons why we see this large increase on the school mitigation fee side. The net capital cost per student has increased about 39%. The increase reflects 2 years of inflation, and then it also reflects the cost of construction increases. So impact fees only are the local share. This is the local share, the state share, and then it's bumped up to be combined with impact fees and hit 115% of the money that's needed. So it's important to recognize that the school mitigation fees were an option provided to builders to continue to build when schools were overcrowded and they'd otherwise failed the APFO and there were no new schools in the plan. So these fees only affect certain residential developments. For instance, these fees are not paid by any housing development within a municipality unless they have their own fee. And I know the city of Frederick's here. They have their own school mitigation fee, but no one has paid it so far. Or projects that passed the APFO because schools were adequate. Or many projects that have been under construction for some time, like Brunswick Crossing, the Linton property, and some others. It primarily impacts residential projects approved in recent years in Urbana, Monrovia, and Newmarket, where the schools are overcrowded now, will continue to be overcrowded. So you see this impacting no one in the northern part of the county, Middletown, Myersville, Brunswick. It's really very much focused on impacting proposed developments on the east side of the county, some of which have not started yet. A few of them have started, but many of them haven't yet. And these residential developers agreed to pay these fees rather than wait for the schools to be built. So again, this is not an option I probably would have ever put into the APFO to start with, but it was approved over the objection of the Board of Education, PTAs, school advocates, and some larger developments took advantage of it, locked it down with their DRA, and we have what we have. We also need to restore the automatic adjustment to the formulas. So I am proposing that the council consider adding the automatic annual adjustment to both the impact fees and the school mitigation fees that traditionally have been there, but were removed, I think, in 2012, maybe 2011. So again, I showed these new costs for school mitigation fees on the screens, and I want to restate, I'm not proposing any changes to the formulas. I'm just updating these fees using current cost of construction. I do realize these numbers represent a substantial increase, but that is because the actual cost to build schools over the past year has just increased substantially. As the county executive, I was challenged to find $30 million for Frederick High School. And I'm going to be challenged to find another $15 million for the 2 elementary schools that we want to build in the upcoming budget year, fund to be built. And it's a staggering challenge for me to try to come up with $45 million. So it was not my intent to have raising these fees be something I would do this first year in office, because they were raised about a year ago. But it's a result of the realities in school construction. It's really a perfect storm of market conditions, state legislation, and school overcrowding. If we don't keep impact fees and school mitigation fees up to date based on current costs, the situation will only get worse, and desperately needed schools will be deferred. These numbers need to reflect actual costs, or one of two things will happen. We won't have adequate schools or a seat for every child in our schools on the east side of the county, and we could even have more students in portables than inside a school building. It's an education issue. It's a safety issue. I attended the Board of Ed meeting, and I heard some real serious concerns about safety in some of these severely overcrowded schools. It's really just unworkable and unacceptable situation for our students, teachers, and our administrators in these schools. And if the fees aren't raised, the taxpayers will be asked to pick up the full burden of this cost of growth and the cost of school construction increase. And it's my job to protect taxpayers. The challenge we face is so large that many pieces of a puzzle are going to have to come together to resolve it. We need updated numbers in our formula. We need to propose some changes in state legislation. We need to look for innovative ideas and partnerships. We need some new building designs so that Frederick County can move forward and provide the schools our students need. So again, I'm asking the County Council to workshop these adjustments to impact fees and school mitigation fees. We will provide them with bills to advance them as well. And I did ask Reagan Cherney, the administrator or CEO for the Chief Administrative Officer for the County Council, to Chief of Staff, to tentatively schedule a workshop for November 10th. So that's tentatively scheduled. I would like them to understand these formulas, how they're calculated, but I also would like them to advance a solution for our children and our schools. I will note that impact fees and school mitigation fees are updated through a different process. Impact fees needs a bill. It needs the 3 hearings that the council normally has for a bill. School mitigation fees are in the APFO. That's a different public hearing process. It requires the council to pass a resolution to move them forward. It requires the Planning Commission to make a recommendation, and then it will come back to the council for their 3-bill hearing process. So it's a little bit longer. I also want to announce that, again, this is such a big issue. We are scheduling a school construction forum on November 19th in this room. Dr. Lever from the state IAC is planning to come. We're going to have an overview of really what has happened to school construction costs, because we've really focused on prevailing wage, and that's really only a piece of it. You know, it really is market conditions. It really is other factors. And unfortunately, I think we're going to hear that the state is not going to increase the size of its school construction pot, because they have their capital debt affordability commission at the state actually recommended that they reduce their debt. So while asking for more state funding is part of the solution, there's going to be certain challenges there as well. There's going to be state legislation in the upcoming session about some of these factors that impact school construction, so stay tuned for that. We have drafted a bill for that in the legislative package that the council will review next week. And so we march on and march forward. So I know that this is significant on the school mitigation fee side, but the cost of construction is significant as well. So this is one piece of the puzzle. There are others, and we'll be discussing all of them. I really do want to keep our school construction plan moving forward, because we really just can't have kids in these schools that are over 150%, and we're almost there now. We're going to be there before we build these next couple elementary schools. So I hope I've explained this reasonably well. We do have staff reports and formula information on these that will be publicly available soon. So with that, I'll take any questions from the media, or I'll wait till afterwards. Okay. Thank you very much for those of you who have attended. Thank you for watching. School construction is a big priority. Play a part in it. You know, I know school advocates and PTAs will be in support. I know some others will be in opposition. There's lots of implications from this, but I did feel that it was my responsibility to at least put these formulas out there and to move this forward. So thank you very much for joining us, and have a great day.